But in a situation where you find that a look at the situation,
not necessarily tribal or regional.
but I have said that.
All right, thank you for staying with us. You're watching Daybreak on Trust TV. It's time for us to take a look at the dailies on Daybreak. And we begin with the Daily Trust newspaper, where we have the headline there that has a kicker: Israel-Palestine conflict. How attacks on Aqsa Mosque, others triggered crisis. You have the writer that says experts flay Israel's occupying power. Palestinian envoy wants Israel forced to obey international laws. Israeli ambassador fingers Iran as U.S. offers warships, aircraft. AU, Nigeria, Saudi Arabia, others urge ceasefire as death toll hits 1,000. On page 4. You have above the lead story: Bayelsa, Imo, Kogi polls, spate of violence, insecurity worrisome, says INEC on page 13. Pangerson confirms return of fuel subsidy. You have also flood destroys houses, farms in Taraba. Adamawa residents seek help on page 6. These are the main stories on Daily Trust front page this morning.
And now let's take a look at People's Daily. The lead story says INEC raises security concerns over Bayelsa, Imo and Kogi polls, tells parties candidates to rein in supporters. All right, that story there is on page 2 in the People's Daily newspaper. Just above the lead story, Lagdo Dam expect flood in 9 states. NEMA alerts Nigerians. That story is on page 3. And troops kill 31 terrorists, arrest 81 in 1 week. 63 surrender with families. That's coming from the DHQ there, the Defense Headquarters. Page 5 accommodates a more story there. And then empowered to employ 5 million young Nigerians in 5 years. That's at the bottom strip. The federal government is saying this. And then NDLEA arrests 67-year-old at Abuja Airport for ingesting 100 wraps of cocaine. Page 7 has more details of this story. We will not give in to intimidation by politicians, Kaduna FRSC boss saying. Okay, page 6 has more. Why ban on charcoal was lifted by a minister. All right, page 8. And the People's Daily has more details of that story. And lastly, federal government to set minimum standards for English mathematics teachers. Page 28 of the People's Daily has more of that story, and that's the much we can take from the People's Daily this morning. All
right. Now let's take a look at the This Day newspaper, where we have the lead story that says, with a kicker there, Atiku, no matter new attempts to twist facts, Tinubu's INEC certificate is forgery. You also have advises President to tread path of honor by resigning. Alleges plan to gag media ahead of FBI's release of files. You have above the masthead, corporate icon Chris Ogumbanjo is dead. Tinubu mourns. You also have APC governorship campaign and presentation of flag to Ododo. Talking about the Kogi election. Tinubu unveils ambitious plan to create 500,000 jobs as Ajakuta rolling mill nears completion. So these are the main stories on this day newspaper.
So let's begin from above the masthead of the Daily Independent newspaper. Contractors resist Owando accusation of Ajib over debts. I started on the front page, continue reading on page 7. And federal government suspends N-Power scheme, begins its audits. All right, starting on the front page as well. The lead story this morning says technology, insider abuse, fraud enablers in banks. Started on the front page, continue reading on page 29. And the beer prices bubbling up from this week. Page 6 has that story. And then Sarah asks court to stop Akpabio others from collecting pensions. Page 29 has details of the story. NDLEA arrests 67-year-old for ingesting 100 wraps of cocaine. Page 7 has details of that story. And Tinubu administration will harness Kogi natural resources, and that's coming from the Vice President Kashim Shettima. And this story is it's associated with the pictorial we see there at the Kogi governorship, APC governorship campaign flag-off in Lokoja yesterday, Sunday. And Israel declares war with Hamas as battle continues. Death toll soars. Page 7 has more. And INEC worries over violence ahead by Aqsa, Imo, Kogi gubernatorial polls. And the writer attached to this story says no deadline extension for upload of polling agents after October 10. The last story will be taken this morning from the Daily Independent as CDS reaffirms commitment to upholding principles guiding armed forces. Page 6 has details of that story.
All right, so let's take a look at the Abuja Inquirer, the next paper to consider then. It has the lead story that says FCTA residents tussle over Berger Park construction. You also have the writer to that story. It says it distorts Abuja master plan residents. Not true. FCTA fires back. That's the main story there on the Abuja Inquirer. All right. Now, for more perspectives on the stories on our front pages, we have joining us Suleiman Ubagaya, who is the CEO of Skylimit Media Group and editor, and also former vice president of the Nigerian Guild of Editors. Thank you so much for joining us on Daybreak, as always.
Thank you for having me on the program.
Thank you for coming.
All right. Well, let's start off with one of the stories that appears quite interesting here. It's been speculated over weeks now or months now that the government is now paying subsidy as well. So Penga Singh is also now confirming that there's a return of fuel subsidy payment after all that have been said and done. So clearly, subsidy has refused to go. It has found its way back somehow.
Well, I want to start by commending the government for reintroducing subsidy. You know, the president has admitted to the fact that he rushed in announcing the removal of subsidy on the first day of his being president of the country. That was when he was reading his inaugural, making his inaugural speech. And he also admitted to the fact that it wasn't even part of the speech, which means it wasn't well thought out of. You know, he just took the liberty of introducing it at the material time, and the repercussions have been very, very...
Do you think that at some point, perhaps, the president was misunderstood? In the way he said it, it didn't appear as though he actually meant that the subsidy... Yeah, it's something that was on the table even before his coming. The previous administration has said subsidy, you know, is no more, right? They've said that, and perhaps he was just trying to re-echo that, and then maybe not immediately after making that pronouncement.
Yes, clearly the previous government of Muhammad Buhari did not budget for subsidy beyond June of this year, which means subsidy will have ended whether President Tinubu announced it or not by June. You know, but his announcement of the removal on May 29 when he took over the reins of power, unfortunately was obviously misinterpreted, as you are trying to suggest, you know, by the people, and it created a lot of chaos from day one. If you remember, there were very long queues of vehicles. You know, people were desperate to make a last ditch effort to buy petrol and fill up their tanks, knowing very well that any moment from that time, the price was going to skyrocket to 500 naira plus. I'm forgetting, is this 530? I'm forgetting how much it was.
But it differs in different parts of the country. I think in Abuja we're buying for 530.
530, exactly. In Lagos, I think it was 490.
490, 458, 448. Yes.
Exactly. So obviously because of logistic reasons,
yes,
you know, they have to, we now import fuel. We've been importing fuel for years now. And the Apapa port is the main landing point. So those illegals will not have to incur cost of transportation. And that is why it is easier and cheaper for people to buy illegals.
Editor, but just on the flip side, if the president made that statement and he admitted that he made that statement, I think it's something that can be retracted. What he said was subsidy is gone. He wasn't specific it was going to go that minute or it was going to go after the specified date, which is June of 2023. So why the untold hardship on Nigerians? People have argued that. If you were supposed to say 1 month, maybe measures would be put in place before, then
yes,
why immediately?
Why did the federal government feel reluctant to perhaps retract and perhaps or explain or try to?
Well, obviously the government was faced by what I will call Hobson's choice. It was practically faced with no choice at all. In the first place, there is the issue of some people benefiting in trillions of naira, billions of dollars of Nigerian coppers in the name of subsidy. You know, it's simply a scam, largely is a scam. We know all the malpractices going on in the ports in collaboration with a lot of governmental agencies. So obviously the government or Mr. President wanted a situation where that practice will be put to an automatic stop. Unfortunately, he did not reckon with the difficulties that decision or that pronouncement was going to inflict on the people. And also the fact also that it is a decision that is bound to upscale insecurity in the country. Because you see, when people are faced with untold hardship at unprecedented levels as they are now, a lot of things are very possible. People that were never criminals, who have never thought of being criminals, have become criminals. And that aggregates to, you know, upscaling of insecurity. So the cost is becoming too unbearable, not just for the citizens, also for the government in terms of management of the country. Things could easily spiral out of proportion if the government does not act immediately. So I think, specifically to answer your question, the delay was informed by the fact that government was weighing the options as to whether it should roll back what it said, I mean what the president said, and face the risks of Nigeria getting duped by a few individuals, or simply rolling it back, you know, and having a happier citizenry, a more secure country. So I think after weighing the option, the government must have thought that the second option of having a happier and more secure country is better. You know, and of course, the great sage Nelson Mandela said, only a fool does not change his opinion when faced with superior arguments.
So we can all agree now that what we have is a partial withdrawal of the subsidy. Perhaps government is not paying as much as it were before now. And for how long is this going to last? And, you know, do you think that we should have more information? Maybe government should just come clean, if you like, with information as regards this, to say, well, we have reconsidered. And I recall that there was a statement by Ajuri Ngilale where he said that there was never going to be further increase on the price of the product from the 615 that Nigerians are paying now. But what wasn't said then was whether or not government was going to take any step to actually make sure that it stays at that price, or whether the price, you know, at the global market and all that. I mean, just what should we expect from government, really?
You are very completely right. Accountability is the in thing. Government should come out and be very transparent in the way it runs the affairs of this country. Ngilale, the presidential spokesman, indeed has made that statement separately, and I think even the Minister of Information has re-echoed it. But the issue now is the government to come out clean, and admit to the fact that it has reintroduced subsidy, even if on a partial basis. Of course, like I did explain, there are very, very serious implications of allowing the market forces to determine the cost of petroleum. Because if the market forces had been allowed, it would have meant that by now we'll be buying a liter of petrol at well over 1,000 naira per liter. I'm telling you.
Oh, right.
You can imagine.
Let's take our attention now to Kogi State, where INEC is raising security concerns about the elections coming up by Aqsa, Imo, and Kogi. And yesterday, Kogi flagged off their APC gubernatorial candidate flagged up its campaign for the November 11, 2023 election. And trust me, there have been a lot of not too pleasant stories coming from Kogi State in particular about, different parties perpetrating different kind of crimes. People are being reported dead, kidnapped, and all of that. Let's get your thought on the upcoming elections now, particularly in Kogi State.
There is every reason to get worried about developments in Kogi, particularly pertaining to the forthcoming gubernatorial election. 4 years ago, when Governor Haibel was returning to office, you recall that a woman of the opposition party, I think PDP,
yes,
was burned alive in her house.
Yes.
And I am not aware if anything has been done, since that time by way of arresting the perpetrators. Of course, the government of the state was pingered. I'm not sure whether the
suspects were arrested, but
I mean, have they been prosecuted? It's one thing to just arrest people, and it's another to, ensure they are prosecuted and make to pay the music to pay for their sins. Obviously, because the government in power is probably benefited from what happened. I'm sorry, I have to put it this way. The reason why those suspects that have been arrested have not yet been properly prosecuted. So there is every cause for concern about Kogi. It's a very desperate situation, and the stakes are probably even higher now. That Governor Haibel is going to finish his 8-year tenure. There is one thing about governance or politics. Some incumbents feel the person that will succeed them is far more important than probably even their second tenure. Because you see, first of all, your legacy can be completely wiped out if the candidate that wins the election is from the opposition side. So your legacy is at danger, and there is also the issue of corruption. I'm sorry, most of our leaders, we all know, is an open secret, are heavily corrupt. So every governor or every leader wants to cover his tracks. And the best way they feel they should cover their tracks is by anointing a successor and desperately ensuring the successor wins by hook or by crook. It is a direct threat to democracy because, it's like staging a military coup, a civilian coup, so to say. In as much as we are not going to allow the people to be the ones to determine who governs them, then do we call it democracy? It's no longer democracy. So we need to be very careful, not just about Kogi, but also about Imo, Bayelsa, and every other state where off-season elections are going to take place. And I'm worried, honestly, about these off-season elections.
Yes.
I don't know. Of course, unfortunately, there is nothing anyone can do. I wish all the elections would be held at the same time rather than having things...
Maybe we need a unification here. I don't know how that is going to happen, but, some people have to forfeit 1 year.
Yeah, I think so. If that were to happen, really.
Okay, we have another story here, an interesting one, on page 14 of the Daily Trust newspaper, talking about the NPower. Federal government have decided to suspend the NPower program, and several reasons were given for that. Some of the reasons is that some of the beneficiaries, have finished or have passed out, if you like, with the program, but are still receiving stipends from the federal government, and all. So it talks about wanting to audit, the whole program, to look at those that are no longer on the program and are still receiving money, and investigate thoroughly, really, disbursements and enlistment of beneficiaries on the program?
Well, in a way, I will support the government because we all know that a lot of fraud is being perpetrated in the name of the N-Power scheme. But the flip side is that more than 1 million people will now lose their jobs. And you can imagine the repercussions on our security, on the economy itself. Of course, it is true that a lot of fraud is being perpetrated, but I thought the government will have found a middle ground to ensure that, because you see, not all the people benefiting from N-Power are being engaged fraudulently. So government, I thought, will have found a middle ground to ensure that those who are legitimately into it do not suffer the consequences of the action of some.
But on the defense of the government, there's an agreement that if you reach a certain month, you're not a beneficiary anymore. But why do we have people coming back, denying other people who are supposed to be enrolled in this scheme the opportunity to earn a living from N-Power?
That's the problem with Nigeria. It's like the palliatives. We once talked about this, I think about 2 weeks ago when I featured on this program. You see, government will always come up with very beautiful, innovative ideas, projects, policies, but then the implementation is always an issue. You find that some government officials at the very high, I won't say highest level, will want to ensure their own children or their own relatives or people they can easily connive with perpetually remain the beneficiaries of programs. So it's like the palliatives we talked about. You will find that this thing is meant for the poor. Definitely it's not meant for even the middle class. But the biggest beneficiaries are some fat cats in government offices who maybe out of the 5 billion naira that was said to have been given to states, probably about 3 billion or even more. I'm telling you, in the Nigerian corruption context, probably 3 out of 5 billion will end up being pocketed by some fat cats. So it's part of the tragedy of the Nigerian situation.
Well, thank you so much, Suleiman Obagaya, CEO Sky Limit Media Group, editor and former deputy president, Nigerian Guild of Editors, for joining us on Daybreak this morning and sharing your insights.
It's always a pleasure being here.